Matthew 11:25 through 30. At that time, Jesus said, I thank you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and the intelligent and have revealed them to infants. Yes, Father, for such was your gracious will. All things have been handed over to me by my Father, and no one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Come to me, all you who are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light.
So this morning you're going to hear from Shannin. You probably already heard that. Well, if you were here for Hannah's guest welcome, Shannin is someone who's been a part of this place for eons and is an accomplished mom and wife and public educator. And so it was a year ago, I was like, hey, do you want to take Mother's Day? Yeah. And she agreed. So thank you. Will you help me welcome Shannin? We're going to get to hear from her. Yeah. You can clap and thank.
That's okay. Don't clap yet. Well, good morning. Thank you for coming this Mother's Day morning. It's beautiful outside, so I'm glad you chose to find your way through the doors this morning. Like Adam said, I'm Shannin, and he did ask me many, many months ago, and if I was like, yeah, I'm ready, I'd be happy to do that. And then it kind of set in, like, oh my gosh, what did I agree to? So I had a plan. Originally, I thought, well, I'm an English teacher. I live in the world of literature and characterization, and so I thought I'd do like all the great TV moms or the characters that have been created for us from really good writers. And maybe at that point we could identify with some of these moms on this slide up here. Maybe the mom you had or the mom you are. And then I was praying and reflecting and thinking it should probably be more Bible-based. So I went to my Bible and read some notes and looked at some stickies and things I'd written in there. And then I thought, well, I don't know my Bible as well as I thought, so I would Google, because that's what we do. I got to the Googler, and I figured out, okay, I need to get to the Bible, and I, of course, like many of you, I ended up in a rabbit holes and spent hours reading and listening to some great podcasts, one of which I will reference on the slide later. But I realized that I was a little embarrassed. I don't know my Bible very well as I would like to. And I'm not very Bible-y. So I thought, well, I am a mom, so I do have personal experience, and I have journals that I've kept for my children since the day they were born, and I thought I would just go to them because there's like some good material here. And I was reading, and as I was walking through that and just turning those pages, I realized that I wrote a lot about the aha moments, just those wonderful days when they were in the sandbox playing or perhaps reading to one another, that those days when I could watch the bond that they were creating that was forming, that steadfast love and loyalty. I tried to capture those moments. There were also, as you can imagine, seasons of growth, development, their first tooth, their first steps, their first words, sometimes their first swear words, and I just would reflect on those days, and there were seasons of fear and worry, seasons of I could see myself processing and questioning, disappointments and worry, and a lot of worry, and I saw times where there was just hurry, like the busyness of and noisiness of life. I humbly carry the title of mom, and we've been privileged. I get to share that journey with my best friend, and I do believe that our kids were incredible little kids and children and have turned out okay, I believe, as adults now. But as they've outgrown one season and grown into another season, I've experienced a lot of proud mom moments, coupled with seasons of relief. And not relief that I think they turned out perfect by any means, and not relief that I mean like, oh my gosh, I did it, or phew, we made it, but really like this sense of relief in knowing that over 20 years of parenting, I finally have learned who to listen to. And it's not my friends that looked like they had it all together. And it's not the experts that have a bunch of letters after their names that have written books and the podcasts that I can get escape into at times. But it's the one parent that never let me down. The relief is that I realize I can't make up for my mistakes or my imperfections, but I am assured that God uses them. And these pages, they once again reminded me of how great our kids turned out, despite having flawed parents, who, as clearly was evident in my own penmanship, were never going to win Parents of the Year. And that's okay, because there's good news for them and for us. We didn't need to be perfect, because they already had the perfect parent, God, the Father. I started these journals really just as an open letter to my kids as they met the world. And my intent was that I would journal every day as their first year unfolded, and I would, at some point in their life, maybe hand them to them on a very momentous occasion. And I failed at that as well, because I didn't write in them every day. I realized I wrote in them sometimes once a week, sometimes once a month. But I did find myself through the years just going back to them and writing in them and needing them, because I realized that I was finding my own processing by just having those pages in front of me. I wanted them to have a piece of their story. I wanted them to have that story from my perspective. I wanted to document those moments that maybe they wouldn't hold in their own memory. I wanted them to know how deeply and completely and unconditionally loved they were. They are. And I realized that perhaps it was for me just as much as it was for them. I hold on to the belief that story is important. It's in the narrative of the Gospels where I first was shown who Jesus is. I believe we each have a story. It is powerful that in watching or listening to someone's story, we can learn. We can learn about ourselves and human experience. We can learn empathy. We can learn how to be reflective. I do believe that story is critical. Everyone has a story, and mine is not very different, perhaps, than many of yours. Each of our stories holds the power to inspire, to encourage, and to empower those that we are brave enough to share with. Not all of us in this room are a mother or a parent, but each of us has been parented. Some of you had exemplary models of this. You had men and women of integrity and character, and they nurtured you, and you were raised with love and support as best they could. And some of us in the room had parents that were not the exemplary models of what we would want to emulate. They're broken individuals, pain, addiction, neglect. And some of us in the room maybe lie somewhere in the in-between, the both and. Regardless, we are all shaped in some way by these chapters. These parenting chapters in our lives, they've impacted how we look at this world, how we nurture relationships, how we make decisions. So here's where I landed. I don't think God was calling me to deliver any sort of wisdom today, to impart to you, that you probably couldn't find in a book or on a podcast. I do think perhaps he was whispering to me to be brave enough to share a small excerpt from one of the parenting chapters in my story, so that perhaps it just could encourage you to reflect on your own. I want to introduce you to a little girl. Now, this is the little girl that I often go back and visit in my memories and my dreams. I just want you to know that when you meet this little girl, she still has a lot to learn, but I have learned so much from her. It's 1980-something, and this girl, she loves reading and she loves music. She's infatuated with Rob Lowe. She likes Grease, the movie. She thinks she's Olivia Newton-John on the playground. She likes grilled cheese sandwiches with ketchup. She enjoys pretty much anything that has to do with her imagination. She loves her dog Buford. She likes watching the Seattle Seahawks on TV, and this is like back in the Chuck Knox era with you had like Steve Largent and Dave Craig. But the point is, she's just a little girl. And there are times she's desperately yearning to please her parents. At the same time, she's starving for their approval. And she fiercely loves her baby brother, who's an infant at this moment. She is probably the most responsible adult in the room on most days. At the ripe old age of 11. We're going to meet her in what's called en media res. This is a narrative style that many authors use, especially in memoir writing, where you're dropped into the middle of the action. And it's usually designed to be a very pivotal or defining moment for the character. So we're going to jump into the action. This little girl is Shanny, and the setting is a small living room. It's the room in which the family, it's like their entertainment and dining experience, which consists of TV trays and television. It is also the community center. It serves as the hub for a lot of their friends each and every day, and that involves lots of laughter, adults at all hours of the day and night and early mornings. It involves lots of music, games, cribbage, backgammon, chess. This also serves, many days before this day and many days that would come after, as the home office, so to speak. My parents were in the horticulture and sales business. And the only difference this night was that I was cowering behind a couch. This day had gone drastically wrong. It had flipped from party to pandemonium in an instant. There was obviously some sort of lack of communication between someone that had arrived to receive an intended product and someone else was disappointed in the exchange. I knew almost all of the adults that would come in and out of our house throughout the years. And I didn't know this individual, and to this day I don't even remember. You know how memories are, like I'm sure I learned and I don't know now. But the point is that things were flying. Tables were flying and objects were flying and words and threats. And I just remember my little baby brother was in sort of a makeshift playpen. And I just grabbed him, and a beer bottle was being broken. It was a weapon. My dad was in the altercation. And I just went behind the couch, kind of pulled it so I was in the corner. There's this brown paneling, and I just sat there. And I just cried and rocked him. And I cried because I was scared, but I was also angry. Because I was old enough to know and smart enough to know that this wasn't normal. In the corner in those terror-filled moments, I couldn't deny the truth and the harsh reality that this was my normal. And there was nothing I could do to change or control their actions or their direction. I couldn't make them love me anymore or love me enough to want to do something different, to want something better for themselves, something more for us. So I just cowered and prayed. I was praying for the police to come. I was praying for the police not to come at the same time. I didn't want them in trouble, but I did want them to change. I found in those moments, as I was praying and crying, that I needed to believe that help was on the way. I was scared, but I was strong, and I was not alone. And I remember knowing that that moment, I could start to take charge. I knew my baby brother needed to be protected and comforted, and so I did that. I just whispered in his ear, promising him it was going to be okay. And I sat still, and I listened for the sirens that would save us. Looking back with my adult goggles on, I can now see the power of surrender. And I've come to my own definition of surrender. I believe that it's just this relinquishing of control at our most desperate, weakest, and most vulnerable times, but it's not giving up. It's the sense of giving up on the idea that I can manage it. I knew I could make some choices. I vowed to protect my little brother from this world, in this world, and I could let go of the picture that I had of a perfect or normal family or parents, what I thought that should look like, what I'd been praying for that to look like to a God that I hoped desperately existed. Believe it or not, there is joy to be found in this same night, because it's this night that I realized God was real. He is real. From behind a couch in the corner, he opened a little door just for me to believe that I could create the life that I wanted. You see, that night I learned to surrender. I learned how to remain still in the storm and to listen. I learned to find gratitude and joy and the power of possibility even in the dark, scary corners of life. I realized praying for a changed or reformed parent is really an unfair prayer. I'm completely aware there's no normal, there is no perfect. But in my 11-year-old eyes, a perfect parent just pretty much meant, be present, be engaged. I thought a perfect parent might go on a bike ride or maybe perhaps help you with your homework, coach the soccer team. Not even coach, maybe just come to the soccer game. That would be nice. I didn't think I was asking for a lot. But I did realize that what I had was all I had. And I was desperate as I wanted them to put us before their friends or before their vices. I craved it, actually. I knew that it was up to me to make myself happy and to find that in this world. Please know my parents were good people. They were kind-hearted. They were fun to be around. They were gentle. They were madly in love with each other. They just didn't always put parenting as their first priority. I never stopped loving them, and I never doubted that they loved me. I have my parents actually to thank for a lot of things. My passion for music, my love of reading, my sense of responsibility, how to problem solve, deal with disappointment. I knew I was loved. And it's my dad who actually introduced me to Jesus. And it was Jesus who would cradle me and carry me and walk with me and lead me in the times when I felt alone. I spent years wishing they would change, or just praying they would want to change. And I surrendered that dream that night. And the years would unfold, and nothing much would change, to be honest with you. I wish I could tell you it did. But I would still often be embarrassed or ashamed, and I worked hard to hide that in a disguise of lies. I strived for perfection in other areas where I could have control and get that. I loved school. I loved doing well in school. I embraced learning and my teachers. I couldn't wait to get there, and I dreaded leaving. But I knew there was power in education, and I wanted to get the most out of that I could. I found church and a family. There were mentors there that God placed to guide me along the way. And so I lived in this duality that I had created for many years until this little girl grew up, and she met the man of her dreams who saw all the trash and loved her anyway. And she was able to become a mommy, and things forever changed, as you can imagine and as many of you know. After the birth of our second child, my mom was losing her battle to cancer. And there was a night when I was on her bed and we were just, I don't even remember now, talking about nothing or everything or who knows. And we were laughing. I was rubbing her feet with lotion, and it turned. She got very serious and put out her cigarette, which I knew meant, oh my gosh, like this is going to be important. And so I was watching her, and she just started to confess. Like she was telling me stories and apologizing and for choices that she had made and things she didn't do and did do. And it was awkward, and I tried to deflect in that vulnerability, in that awkward moment. I was putting, bottle on the lotion, and I was fidgeting and putting stuff away, and I was trying to be funny and not very funny, but I said something like, oh, well, I turned out okay anyway. And she just said, Shanny, just be still for just a minute. Like, come and sit down and just listen. And so I did. I sat in her presence, and with a storm of her impending death all around us, and I listened. And I learned, because it was then it fully registered. I had been praying for perfection, and that is exactly what God delivered. He had blessed me with the perfectly imperfect parents. The parents that I needed in order for him to refine me into the woman he wanted me to become. And so I told her that. She was the perfect mom for me. In that precious moment, I surrendered my anger, my hurt, my disappointments of the past. It didn't erase the scars. It did not excuse the actions, but it provided peace, maybe for both of us. And then not too long after this night, my father would succumb to lung cancer, and I was able to have some really good conversations with him in those last few weeks as well. I'd been holding on to a lot of regret, and I was able to let some of that go. I still would be lying if I said it didn't hurt, that I was still confused, and I spent many nights still grieving. I was grieving for the loss of making everything right with my parents, not being able to get that and to get to that point where I needed more time. I was grieving for my brother, who was lost in the darkness of his own anger, addiction, and depression. I was grieving for the loss of the little girl that I didn't get to be, the innocence of her carrying too much. I grieved for the loss of the grandparents that my children wouldn't get to have. Because as messed up as my parents' parenting skills were, they were wonderful at being Nana and Papa. Unconditional love is an incredible gift from God, isn't it? We can love people so deeply, even when they've wounded us. We don't stop loving them. Over the years, as I've watched my children grow, they continue to love me even when I'm unlovable. I can honestly say that I've learned over the past, 30 years of being parented and 20 years of parenting, that I've learned to let go of the power of the past and the control that it has over me. I've surrendered my guilt, my shame, humiliation, and anger. I learned to love my parents for who they were and forgive them for who they weren't or couldn't be. There are other chapters I could share with you in this story, other parenting adventures that I was part of, but they might make you cringe, or if my husband tells them, they always make people laugh for some reason. But I've had a wonderful partner in parenting, and I think we've made a pretty good team over the years. But we got it wrong a lot of the time. We still do. Being a parent is hard. Being parented is hard, no matter your age. God does not expect us to be perfect parents or perfect children. He is the perfect parent. We don't have to be, nor did my parents need to be. Luckily for me, and for each of us in this room, God uses imperfection. He takes brokenness and fallibility, and he makes it something beautiful. He takes flawed and sinful people and uses them for his purposes. First and foremost, we are the children of a perfect parent. And trusting this as truth, we can let go and surrender our unfair expectations of ourselves and others. We can stop listening to the noise and the voices of others, whether it's our own voices speaking our inadequacies or our shame or insecurities, whether it's the experts of books and podcasts, or sometimes well-intentioned family and friends. Whatever voices seem the loudest. This new season of mine was marked actually by not becoming deaf to those voices. I still want to learn and to listen from the people that God places in my life. But when it comes to who I listen to in regards to how it's going to shape me or help me make decisions, I'm more selective. And I find voices of wisdom and truth. I intentionally find gratitude and joy and the power of possibility in each day. And when I was preparing for this, I was, like I told you, I went down the rabbit hole. I was listening to podcasts, and I came across this podcast on C.S. Lewis, and it was about a lot of the different books that C.S. Lewis has written, and he's a priest. He's an Anglican priest from St. Philip's Cathedral in South Carolina. And I just kept finding myself going back and listening to what he had to say about joy and what C.S. Lewis had to say about joy. And I found that I think maybe we in our society have confused joy and happiness. And I don't think they're synonymous necessarily. I think that I have found that joy is knowing in this moment to be content and that something good is coming. Help is on the way. And I believe that you can find, at least I have been able to find joy in each day, even the hard ones. And sometimes it's just a glint of light that shines through the cracks. And sometimes it's a floodlight. But no matter, I can keep my eyes on him, and I can anxiously wait for him to open that door that he's about to reveal the joy that he wants me to experience in this life that he's created for me. So this week, I encourage you, look back on the chapters of your story. Read or reread, skim, scan, annotate, sticky note, the parenting chapters of your life. I'm going to ask you to reflect on 3 questions today. I want you to be honest, and I want you to ask yourself, where is God encouraging me to surrender my burdens and submit to his will? I'm asking you to ask yourself, where are the opportunities, and what opportunities is he providing for you to sit, be still, to wait, and to listen to what he's trying to reveal to you in your life? I'm asking you, how is he calling you to find gratitude and joy in the pages he has written? Maybe we can all learn something from that little girl behind the couch. That no matter what chapter you are in right now, faith can exist alongside uncertainty. I know it to be true. Submitting our hearts to our Father, the only perfect parent, frees us to live the life that we have been praying for. I'd like to pray. Dear Jesus, we surrender ourselves completely to you. You are our strength when we are weak, our refuge in time of trouble, our perfect Father. We pray for clarity to hear your voice amidst the noise of the world. Open our ears to discern your voice more clearly. Guide us in making decisions. Seek your will above all else. Help us to hear you first and to listen to who you say we are before we ever look or listen to others. We lift up our hearts in prayer, asking for an overflowing joy that transcends our circumstances. Thank you for loving us just as we are. Help us to write chapters in our story that honor you, the ultimate author of our lives. Amen.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about Narrate Church, find us online at narratechurch.org or look us up on Facebook or Instagram.